All right. YouTube's telling me I'm live, so yeah, hopefully we're good to go. um, Let me know if something's up with the audio or anything else like that. Yeah, as usual. So welcome everyone to the stream. We're going to talk a little bit about the course that I've created and answer any questions you might have. I'm going to just start with an overview and then talk a little bit about some more specific things. So I've got all the files here in front of me. And maybe we can actually start with the initial PDF and open that up. And this will give you an idea of everything that's actually in the course. So it's split up into different parts. And I just noticed there's a there's a typo in the PDF. Typical. Anyway, I'll probably fix that in the next few days. But so there's 6 parts to it. And basically the introduction is a little bit about why my Blender UI looks a little bit different and kind of to get you up to speed on what I changed so you can either emulate it or at least know what's different. And it's not really necessary for the course, but I do work that way for some specific reasons, which I go into. Then the modeling is pretty much all of it is procedural modeling. So there's very little like modeling tools and, you know, stuff like edge loops and polyflow and all that stuff. I mean, obviously it's good to know those things, but I wanted to focus on something a little bit different, mainly because I really love working procedurally and there's a lot you can get from Blender. Now, sort of these vertex weights here, this section over here, this is sort of where it turns into why it's marked as Blender 2.83, which you might have seen on the store page. Well, it's possible to do the same thing in Blender 2.82. There's actually an older video on the YouTube channel that shows you the exact workflow. Just a little bit of UI stuff, a little toggle has been added in 2.83 and it makes it way faster to set up. So I kind of use that for the duration of the course. And yeah, this is kind of why it's marked 2.83. Originally the course was supposed to launch around the release of 2.83 and then it got pushed, and I didn't want to wait another 2 to 3 weeks. I figured, you know what, we'll just put it out, and there's there's a little discount during the 2.83 beta. So you can see that's why I put it in here as well. And there's a link you can click to take you straight to the downloads for the 2.83 beta. But like I said, you can still do it in Blender 2.82, and I would say probably 2.81 as well, even though I haven't double checked it. But I think most of what I'm using is at least in 2.82 and probably in 2.81 to a certain degree, because things are changing rapidly, as you might have noticed. So then the animation part is really not like, it's not, while I use keyframes and everything, obviously, it's more about how you can use or optimize animation. So I start with a couple of things where I just talk a little bit about how to set animation up quickly without having to go into, you know, a whole bunch of keyframes and all that kind of thing. And there's a lot on caching as well, which in itself doesn't maybe seem like the most interesting subject, but it can really just massively speed up your entire workflow if you understand how it works, and I do some cool stuff with it as well, and it just gives you an idea of what's possible. So then shading, well, everything is going to relate to Eevee, because this is a Eevee focused course, and I'll get to why that is in just a minute as well. Well, obviously the name suggests it, as it's called real-time motion graphics. But mainly for shading, I don't really go into like just the principled shader, and that's something I definitely want to mention. I do assume quite a bit of knowledge here. So if you're like a total beginner with Blender, what you could do, let me just grab a Firefox window here. Can I hide the bookmarks bar? There we go. Let's just have a look. There is on YouTube a Blender Fundamentals course. Fundamentals. So this is a playlist from the Blender Foundation itself, and I would definitely recommend looking into this. If you are a beginner, I would start here, because I would hate for you to pay money for the course and then be a bit disappointed that I'm actually skipping over a lot of the basics. But I think if you check this out, and especially if you look at just the you know, all the different moving parts of Blender, you should be able to follow along quite a bit. But yeah, again, I didn't want to do another beginner course because I think there's a lot of great ones out there already, and I feel like I had more to offer just going really deep into this whole motion graphics thing and focusing on Eevee. So that being said, with shading, it's a lot of sort of tricks to get the most out of Eevee and how to set things up properly, things like that. So then rendering is arguably the most and least interesting thing when it comes to 3D. And again, I didn't necessarily focus on specific techniques, but just trying to understand how Eevee works, how it works internally, and how you can, again, get the most out of it. So this is definitely a bit more technical, I think, than some of the other stuff. But I guess this is down to rendering. And I even talk about, you know, how to get stuff out of Blender to other applications and things like that if you like to use After Effects and other things. So I think it's important that, you know, you can build your own pipeline and sort of have fun with it. And then the project section, which is probably my favorite section to record, because all of this stuff is really cool and I get to explain a lot of stuff. But in the project section, all of these techniques that we've seen all come together to make some really cool things. And I'll spend a little bit more time showing those. And for all of the different sections where we actually end up with a file, I create pretty much everything from scratch in every single video, and you actually have access to all those files in the Blender files folder as well. So if you just want to look at some files from a specific lesson, they're there. You can pull them apart. I did my best to give everything names, but yeah, it's there. So for the projects, I guess let's have a look at the videos first. So the first three projects are a VJ tunnel. So here you can see the end result. And then the second one is like this wavy cube background. It looks pretty cool. And the third one here is a walking guy, which I've created. I created in Cycles before, but I recreated it in Eevee as well. And those first three, the reason I pick those up first is because you see me create them from start to finish. I narrate the whole thing. They take, yeah, somewhere between, I'd say 45 minutes to an hour and a half, maybe. So those are quite long videos, but you get to see the entire process and I don't cut anything out. So if I make a mistake, it's in there and you can see how I solve things. And I think it's really important to show the entire workflow. Then this fourth one is the hologram landscape. You can see this is roughly 44 minutes. And this is a breakdown. This took me a little bit longer to create, and that would have made the video like 2 to 4 hours, depending on how quickly I can get things set up. And it would have been a little bit too long. And for me as well, if you have to record something for 2 to 4 hours in one go, it's just prone to a lot of errors, and I didn't want to put anybody through that. So this is just a breakdown, but it goes through all the different moving parts of the render. And again, all these files are included, so you can open them up and pick them apart yourself. Then the last 5 videos are also breakdowns, and they're how I created some of the titles that you see for the promotion. So, I mean, it is a motion graphics course, and again, I use a lot of these techniques just to kind of show you how quickly you can set things up. And these are a little bit shorter, these last 5, but I thought it would be fun to kind of go a little bit meta and show you that, you know, kind of put my word to the test. So create all the promotional material and everything in Eevee, in Blender, with all the stuff that we've learned in the course. And there's a couple little extra hints here and there. But like I said, I think that hologram landscape is probably one of the favorites. So let's have a quick look. And open that up. So you can see it's only 4.5 megabytes. And this might go completely white and crazy. So this is a bug that I've reported. It's very easy to solve. All you need to do is just change a single render setting. So if you see, if I just change this and change it back, I think it's got to do with particles that emit light in Eevee, but the bug's reported and it's been confirmed as a bug. So hopefully by the time 2.83 comes out, this should be fixed. But if you encounter this, all you need to do is just change one setting. So you could, you know, turn off and on one of these toggles or whatever, and it's fixed. So it's kind of a stupid bug, but if that's all it is, then we actually don't have to worry about it too much. So you can see the entire scene, and it runs near real time. Well, I say near real time. All of this stuff has been created at 60 frames a second. Not really for any other specific reason, but that I could. And I thought it was interesting to kind of see how far we could push Eevee. And like if I render something like this, and I've got an older card here because my main card died or started dying recently. This is still only a few seconds for a frame with some compositing and everything on top. But again, I go through the whole process, so you can pull all these files apart and yeah, just play with them and kind of learn as you go. So that gives you a bit of an idea of what's included. I'll answer some questions. I'll move on to the next little thing I wanted to say. So, excited for the Eevee specific stuff. There we go. Am I going to cover animation nodes as well? It's not covered in this course, and mainly because I only use it occasionally. So I don't feel like my skill level is at a point where I can explain it as well as some of the other stuff in the course. It's not that I don't like it. I'm sort of waiting to see what happens with everything nodes. I might extend it in the future, but don't hold me to that, because again, I don't use animation nodes all that much. I kind of like doing everything with modifiers and the stuff that's built into Blender. There's only the Walking Man is the only project where I use any add-ons or services outside of Blender. Everything else you see is done with just the tools that are built into Blender, bar, you know, enabling some built-in add-ons that ship with the Blender release. So, but yeah, it's no knock against animation nodes. It's great. I just felt like it wouldn't. I'm not the right person to explain it right now. There's people that are better suited. So, so let's see. All Eevee, yes it is. Many times when I open some file from Edge, everything gets slow. I try to keep it somewhat lightweight. So yeah. New real time with 4 GPUs. Well, actually, Eevee only uses one. It only uses your display GPU. And as I said, in this case, I actually had to swap out my newer Titan X for an older one. So this is on the 900 architecture. So this is 2 generations old, this card. Because unfortunately this thing, and I can show you, which is a really amazing card, has started dying on me. So I need to figure out what to do. So yeah, there you go. Keeping your old workstations around is a good thing, I guess. So yeah. So just bought it, still downloading. Oh, cool, thank you. I appreciate the support. So let's see. So turning on and off some collections seems to fix the bug as well. Yeah, it's just, you just need to like change something and then it's fine. At least they're aware now. So I'm glad the bug report got accepted, and hopefully it'll be, you know, it'll be fixed pretty soon. So let's see. It's a shame that Brazilian currency is in such a bad place right now. Looking for friends to buy together. Yes, I think we had a very short conversation on Twitter. So I will mention this. Obviously, I would prefer if everybody buys a copy, but I've licensed the course Creative Commons for a very specific reason. Mainly, right now, not everybody has great financial means because of everything going on, and add to that the global economy is just a nightmare to begin with when it comes to exchange rates. So the course is licensed Creative Commons. So if you do want to save up with a few people and then buy it together, you are allowed to share it. Again, obviously I would prefer if you're able to afford it that you buy it yourself, but I completely understand if you can't, and that's why I've licensed it that way, because I do want it to be available to everybody, or as many people as I can, you know, let them get their hands on it. So talking about price, let's actually go to that real quick. So Blender Market, here's the page. Currently there's a 10% launch sale. So until Blender 2.83 is released, I figured I'd take 10% off, sort of as a launch sale and as a thank you to the people that get in early. After that, it will be $50. Right now, it's $45. So yeah, I'm always happy to hear feedback, especially if you're in an area where this is quite expensive. I would love to hear what kind of pricing is, makes it easier on your wallet and that kind of thing. Because I do, we have a very large global Blender community, so I do want to make sure that it is available to people and that it's not unfair to some compared to others. But yeah, I live in an area where stuff is a bit more expensive, I guess. So it's a bit of a toss-up. I tried to keep it as fair as possible by licensing it Creative Commons at least. So let's see, what else do I want to talk about? So I talked about the discount. Yes, so the final thing is I recorded the entire thing on a laptop, and the specifications are in here as well. So I bought a laptop, I think late last year sometime, when my previous one ended up dying. I kill a lot of hardware apparently, but there you go. So this is a fairly new-ish laptop. It has an RTX 2070 in it, but honestly, any sort of gaming PC or laptop from the last couple of years with a decent dedicated graphics card should be more than enough to get you started. I purposely set it up this way because, again, I wanted to focus on what you can do if you have a normal computer, if you want to put it that way, because I've been working as a professional for a number of years and I have access to a lot of hardware because I've been able to do work, but I kind of wanted to bring it back and kind of, just really find something cool that a lot of people could partake in and have fun with. So let's see, I think that's most of what I wanted to say. So I'll answer some questions, and if anybody wants to, if anybody has any questions, now would be the time to ask them, because I don't think the stream is going to be super long. I'm going to keep it fairly simple. Just wanted to make sure that everybody's sort of in the loop and gets a chance to ask stuff. So let's see. So just running through. Don't you get limited with Eevee and nodes? I don't think so. You gotta get a little creative sometimes. Obviously, Eevee has its own advantages and disadvantages. A lot of the stuff that I explained, you could easily throw into cycles and tweak and push it even further if you wanted to. But again, I focused on Eevee because I think it's a really interesting engine. There's a lot to be done with it and a lot to be explored. So let's see. Will these tutorials be very different from the live streams? Not really. I'm actually pretty sure that I've covered a number of things that are in the course in previous live streams even. I just wanted to create something cohesive as a package for people to kind of go through and be able to experience kind of as a whole and run you through the entire thing. If you're patient and you're willing to sit through like 20 hours of live streams, then you could probably get a large amount of information from the course, from some of the stuff that's on YouTube before. But again, I just aimed, it'd been a couple of years since I've done a full course, and I heard some really nice things about the one that I did for the Blender Cloud back in the day, and I kind of wanted to push this forward and do another one and kind of see how that works. So yeah, I hope that kind of let's see, I hope that kind of, what I was going to say, answers your question. I like your Blender layout. Do you have a config somewhere? Well, actually, I go through how that Blender layout is set up from start to finish in the first introductory session that's in here. So I talk about why I set it up that way and just some of the stuff that you can do with the Blender UI. It's incredibly flexible. You can set it up any way you want and easily save it as a default. So there's options like here, once you set up a scene into defaults, you can save that scene as your startup scene. So every time you open up Blender, it looks that way. And same with the preferences. I go through a whole bunch of preferences that just make your life a lot easier. So the dots look cool. How did you make them? Haha, that's a trick question, but I will show you if you really want me to. So basically the dots are, if I can select them properly now. So let me have a look. So landscape instancer, there we go. So it's basically an instance. So I'll display it here, and let's unhide that guy. I show him from here. Anyway, it's just a single object that's been parented. So this one, if it's somewhere to be found. No, doesn't want to work with me today. Okay, so it's just a single cube that has a bit of a modifier on it, and then there we go. Let's grab these two, and then I'll show you the full thing. So here you can see the object, and it's been parented to the mesh, and the mesh has been created with a whole bunch of modifiers, as you can see. It's something that I go into, but to create that effect itself, basically you've got instancing, and you can instance on every vert or face. And that's the way I set it up. I believe I did it on the verts. There we go. And then that way you get that effect, which is really cool. And then there's some random shading in there as well to give more of the effect. So it's a very, very quick how I did that part. Yeah, so let's see. Do you go into looping for these animations at all? Yes, I go into looping modifier animations, different types of caches, how to loop keyframe modifiers as well, I believe I talk about. So there is a fair amount of looping stuff that goes into some of these projects. And the, let's see, the VJ Tunnel and the Walking Man, they both loop as well. So you actually see me fully create two loops as well. So you can get an idea of how that works in a project. Yeah, there's a lot there. Obviously my background creating a lot of VJ stuff kind of creeps in there a little bit, but I think learning how to loop something is really important nonetheless, because it teaches you about to think about how animations work and how you can kind of fit them together in different ways. So so many GPUs. Yes, a lot of GPUs. It gets very warm in here. Is this paid course? Also, on which platform will it be released? Yes, it is indeed a paid course. It's my first one in 3 or 4 years, I think. I can't remember. I think it's 2017 that I did the Blender Cloud course. And basically this enables me to kind of keep doing more free stuff in the future. Every now and then I need to make a little bit of money, I guess, to keep going. So yeah, and I'm gonna take a little bit of downtime in the next few months for some personal stuff. But I do intend to fully get back to YouTube and add a lot more content in the future. So it shouldn't affect YouTube in the long run. But yeah, I felt like it was time to do something a little bit bigger and see how well that went. So oh, thank you for your comment, Gendry. Do you work in any other 3D software, or have you switched to use only Blender? Do you have to use Blender? Do you have to use other 3D software for work? So day to day, I use Blender for pretty much everything, I would say. And I freelance, so my clients just want an end result, so they don't really care what software I'm using. I dabble with other stuff. I used to use 3ds Max years ago. I think it's almost 5 or 6 years ago, maybe longer now. And that's where I sort of started with at my first job. I used that for a number of years, I think 4 or 5 years probably. And I really enjoyed using it. It's just as a freelancer, it became a bit too expensive. So I switched over to Blender after trying out a whole bunch of stuff, and now I mostly use Blender, but I'll try other things as well. Like I've been having a lot of fun with the EmberGen beta recently, which is a simulation software that runs on the GPU, so you can do real-time like smoke simulations. It's still very much in development, but it's cool because it can export VDBs, and Blender, the latest Blender also is able to import them, so you can do cool stuff with that. I've used Gaia and World Machine in the past for creating landscapes and that kind of thing. And occasionally, I mean, sometimes somebody will send me something that's maybe in a Cinema 4D format or whatever, and then I might, open up Cinema 4D to figure something out. But mostly I'm using Blender, yeah, just because I like it and I'm so used to it now. it's got its own strengths and weaknesses, I think, just like every other piece of software. So it's yeah, it's up to what you like using. If I were to go to a studio that uses something else, then I might end up using something else. I've messed around with Houdini a little bit in the past, but not so much recently. So yeah, it's very varied, really, but mostly Blender, I guess. So how good a computer do you need? You tend to use very dense meshes. So I showed the laptop specifications. I would say 16 gigs of RAM is comfortable. 8 gigs could probably work. But that's something I talk about in tweaking preference as well, where you can set up Blender to kind of limit how much memory it uses for undo, so you don't get into any issues with all these huge meshes and things, and you can still mess around. Generally, meshes are actually quite performant. And Eevee is able to handle a fair amount of polygons before it really starts slowing down. But yeah, it should be doable on a pretty recent sort of gaming PC or something. So, so let's see. Thank you, Daniel Breen. I'm glad that you like it, that it looks great. I'm happy with the results. So what is different from the Blender Cloud course? Only the Eevee part? No, this is a completely new course. Now, some of the stuff that I've talked about in the original Blender Cloud course does make a comeback, some techniques. But I think this one it's a lot more up to date, because the Blender Cloud course was done in 2.78, 2.79, I want to say. I can't remember which version exactly we were using at the time. But a lot of that information is still very relevant nonetheless. So if you have access to the Blender Cloud, I think it's a great companion course to this one. And between the two, you'll get an absolute overload of information. But I wouldn't disregard it. But this is definitely meant as a completely different course, although it covers some of the same topics here and there. So I'm curious how much a laptop like this costs. I can't remember exactly what I paid for it. It was, I don't know, I'd say around 2,000 euros when I bought it. So not cheap at all. But the new RTX Super laptops have just come out. So the one that I bought has already gone down in price massively. Honestly, there's a couple of laptops around the $1,000 to $1,200/euro mark that actually are pretty decent right now. So yeah, if you're looking for a machine to do 3D on, I would always recommend a desktop over a laptop, just because of upgradability and performance. But if you really want a laptop, I think there's a lot of great options out there right now. Yeah. So, yeah, Gabriel says the cloud course is good but outdated. Yes, thank you. I'm glad that you like it. But how long does it take to go through the whole series? So it clocks in just over 11 hours in total. So quite a bit. I wouldn't recommend trying to get through it all in a weekend. Take your time, watch a couple of videos. So, hello, Pavan. So Jorge asks, assuming your main review was from concert visuals and things like that, how's business lately? Is it impacted by the pandemic at all? Yes, it has been. It's unfortunate. I always try to keep a bit of a buffer for when things slow down. As a freelancer, it tends to go sort of up and down. In my case, and I like to take time off every now and then as well. It's incredibly important. So I wasn't unprepared for a slowdown, but we were in the middle of organizing a conference that was supposed to run the first weekend of May. So we actually had to cancel the conference, and I think towards the end of February, we ended up canceling it. So that suddenly gave me a lot of time, which is kind of the reason why this course sort of materialized. I had recorded some stuff before, but I wasn't super happy with it, and I was still looking for a good theme to build a course around. And all of that stuff kind of came together, and it's been fairly quiet. But like I said, I've got some personal stuff coming up that will take time, and that's why, yeah, it affected me, but at the same time, I think we're all in this together. So I figured I would put my time towards building something like this, which would have been almost impossible otherwise. So, so you have any idea why the texture node editor is so set aside right now? Would be extremely useful in some cases. Yes. The textures, they were taken out initially, the modifier textures, because they're actually part of Blender Internal, the older Blender engine. And then I and some other people complained that, hey, they're super useful, please don't mess with them. So yeah, everybody's been staring at a blank screen. I don't know what to do. I don't really want to put up the trailer or anything, but yeah, let me just set this to render. That's at least a little bit prettier to look at. I was saying, yes, I hope they do bring it back and kind of unify textures in cycles and modifiers across Blender. I believe that's still the plan, but yeah, they're busy doing so much stuff right now that you just kind of need to give them some time to figure it out. But the idea, as far as I know, is still to bring it all together. But yeah, it has been set aside a little bit, which is a shame because it really is powerful. But it would be cool. I hope we're able to build giant procedural textures that we can then use both in cycles and in modifiers and link them all together. That would be amazing. Yeah. So Elise says, you come out with so many crazy great animations. Would love to see how your mind works. Do you use do a lot of your ideas come from customers, or is it just you and your abstract mind? Well, first of all, thank you. I'm glad you enjoy them. It's hard to say. Some of the stuff that you see is definitely sort of R&D for client work, I would say. Let me put the overview up again as well so people can read that in the meantime while I'm rambling on. So it's a little bit of both. I like just experimenting a lot. I really like doing stuff with simulations and in a way my laziness has sort of defined a weird visual style where I don't really like traditional modeling. I can do it if I have to. I'm not super fast, but I'm decent at it. But I don't enjoy the process as much as other people, I think. So yeah, that's why I kind of came up with these ways of working, and it sort of turned into its own style. So it's a mix of both. I like screwing around a lot in Blender, and also there's R&D there for clients as well. But I obviously always make sure to ask them like, hey, if it's okay to post this kind of thing, and yeah, it's a bit of both. So so your VJ said that the Blender conference inspired me to doing it as well. That's really cool. That was actually my first time, so I was incredibly nervous. I was trying to keep my cool, but definitely a crazy first venue to do that for the first time. Then, about volumetric shading on Eevee, do you use some of it? It looks completely bugged on 2.82. I use it all the time. It seems to work fine on my end. I know for a while there were some issues with the Mac version where volumetrics were a little rough, but I think most of those have been resolved. I don't know exactly what the issue might be then on your end, but I use it a lot and it's no problem. So we're going to get the course up. Thank you for answering, Blender Market. Am I using Linux? Yes, I am. I am indeed. Yeah, I like it. So Frank says hi. Hi, Frank. Sorry, I keep looking towards the other direction because that's where the chat is. We go. Do you ever collaborate with people or studios who use Cinema 4D, especially for the more graph stuff? Are you able to work in Blender in those situations? It comes up every now and then, not that much. I work with other people that use 3ds Max a bit more often, but things like Alembic and FBX and that type of thing really helps bridge the gap between different applications. Now we've got Universal Scene Description, USD, which has been added, but I haven't had a chance to look at it in depth yet. So those are the kind of things that will kind of enable data to go back and forth. It'll never be 100% perfect, but I think we've come a long way since the start of trying to mix applications. So it happens. Sometimes they want something really specific. The good thing about all this software becoming rental is if I do need something else for a week or a month, I could just rent it and then do it in that and send it to them. But most of my clients generally want end results that that gives me complete control. So I have issues with Blender, just the buttons too much, and sometimes I get frustrated. Hey, that's 3D for everybody when you start. It's it can be a lot, but take your time and just keep at it, because it will start making sense after a while. And when it does, it just unlocks your creativity like nothing else. So my undo has been super slow on dense meshes. Yes, they're working on that. 2.83 has improved it quite a bit already. So Pavel, thanks for always inspiring us. Well, thank you for being here and saying that. I appreciate it. So, oh yeah, so somebody already mentioned that. 11 hours, yes indeed. I will definitely be watching this on the go during my next trip. Nice. So do I learn some new stuff creating this course, or do I spend more time trying to eloquently explain previously used techniques? A bit of both, actually. I think almost every video has been recorded at least twice, maybe 3 times. So you definitely have a lot of repetition. Like I said, because I want it to be sort of one stream of consciousness. I don't want to edit it too much, because I don't like it when stuff jumps around. Here and there I have to edit out like a cough or something, but most of the time it's just basically one video from start to finish. And sometimes I do learn new things, because when you try to explain something to someone, it really helps kind of setting it in your own mind as well. So it's cool. It's a nice little two-way. But most of the stuff I would say are just techniques that I've been using over the past couple of years. And I wanted to kind of put them all down in one cohesive course so people can get an idea of what's possible when you kind of start thinking outside the box on a few things. So yeah, a bit of both, but definitely a lot of fun. Oh, so Gigi says, it's an amazing course. Just bought it and started to learn dramatic stuff. Thank you. Cool. Well, thank you for your support. So can't wait to see what you'll do with everything nodes in the future. Hashtag RTMG2. Well, the idea is if I do come up with more stuff for the course, initially I want to add it to the current RTMG. Just, you know, don't hold me to that. I obviously don't know what the future brings, but if I come up with more stuff, I would like to pad it out even more, so that in the long run it becomes even better value for people. And yeah, I'm gonna try and treat it as a living course. I haven't really figured out how to do that yet, and like I'm pretty new to all this selling online stuff, so there's a lot of figuring out on my end as well. So let's see. There's a couple more questions. So Joao, is that how I say your name? I hope I said it correct. I've created to collect ideas for improvement. Would love to hear your thoughts and ideas too. I don't know exactly what you're referencing, but you can always hit me up on social media if you want to talk about something. So I'm sorry, I get a little confused. Thank you, Christopher. I appreciate your appreciate your support and your enthusiasm. Wow, it's getting real warm in here. I'm getting a little funky. Hi, Underdwellers. glad to see you join. So is your course a beginner user friendly? No, I would definitely say it's a bit more advanced. I talked about this at the start of the stream, but I'll just very quickly repeat it. The Blender Fundamentals playlist by the Blender Foundation itself is a really great place to start for free. And I think once you get through that and you start understanding Blender, it could be good to start getting into the course. But it is meant for people that have a bit more knowledge of Blender and are looking to kind of push things forward or maybe find some inspiration. So is that Blender conference VJ set available to watch somewhere? No, it unfortunately isn't, but the music is available from Andy Koralchik's Bandcamp, I believe. I completely spacing on what the name of his thing is. Oh man, I'm gonna butcher his name. Let's see if I can find it. And if you're hearing the keyboard, I actually swapped out my crazy loud mechanical keyboard for something else during the course on the laptop, so you don't actually have to hear it. I can't remember where it is. Dang it, I'd have to look for it in on Twitter. If you go to his Twitter, he tweeted it somewhere, so you can listen to the music, but unfortunately the set wasn't recorded. So Derek says, lol, software becoming rentals. Well, it is funny because the moment you have software that you can use that's free, rentals become way more interesting because if you need it, you can just rent it for a month and be done with it. So if that's your main software, then it's rough. But if you just need it every now and then, I actually think it's not the worst idea. I'm just not a huge fan of the concept, but as a freelancer, there are certain aspects of it that do help. So, thanks for the answer. Cool. I'm glad I answered your question. Blender YouTube channel. I'm just gonna skip through some of the questions quickly here because we're at 40 minutes and I think I'm gonna start wrapping up. Yeah, because most of you've been staring at a blank screen here, which isn't really that interesting. So that's the mentality. Music production, yeah, just have fun and you'll get it. Favorite Linux Photoshop alternative? I use GIMP a lot. I like Krita as well. I think they're both really good. But I've just gotten used to GIMP at this point, even though Krita I think is easier to pick up if you're coming from Photoshop because a lot of the shortcuts are similar. Then the ideal Linux Photoshop alternative would be kind of a combo of both of them, I guess. But yeah, they're both very strong projects. And Inkscape is a vector-based program, which is more like Illustrator, and that I actually prefer that over Illustrator, I would say. So. What's the difference between this course and the one on the Blender Cloud? So the Blender Cloud course is older, was done in an older version of Blender, and this one is very much focused on the newer versions of Blender and Eevee, which wasn't available back then. There's a little bit of overlap, but I think this one is definitely a lot more modern and pushes a lot of the ideas that were discussed on a Blender Cloud course a lot further. So, I mean, there's a couple of years between that one and this one, so I've learned a lot myself as well, and kind of wanted to make sure I could share all of that. So I was using Modo for a few years. Now I started learning Blender. I see how much influence Blender has had over the design of Modo. Still prefer Modo's modeling tools, though, more streamlined. Yeah, I mean, it's all good. Everybody's got their preferences. I think Blender, where it excels, is it's a really good overall package. It can do almost everything pretty decently, and it doesn't necessarily shine in one specific area or another, but like you can make an entire production with it. You can edit, composite, do 3D, do 2D. You can do just so many amazing things with it, and I think that's Blender's strength, that it's just a full-on package. So somebody asked, have I ever looked at animation nodes? I'm going to keep the answer short. Yes, I have before, but briefly. I don't use it that much. I'm sort of waiting for everything nodes. Hopefully that will materialize in the future. So Blender has so much to offer: video editing, sculpting, modeling, animation, etc. What feature could you live without? Without? That's a hard question. I don't think I would want to take anything out of Blender. So I'll admit, when the game engine was removed in 2.8, that's not something I ever really used. So I guess I could, I'm going without that one, and it's not really an issue. But I use a fair amount of stuff in Blender. I'll edit stuff occasionally. I'll do a lot of compositing in Blender. I do both Eevee and Cycle stuff, modeling, animation. Almost everything I do is in Blender. It's hard to say. I don't think there's anything I would want to scrap. That would be rough. I think some of the more esoteric simulation tools that are a little bit older, that are harder to kind of get to grips with, I don't think I would miss that much. But then again, if you need them, they wouldn't be there, and that would suck. So yeah, it's hard to say. I don't think there's anything I would want to miss. So how did I get into 3D? How long ago was that? Oh man. I think the first time I ever opened a 3D application, I don't know, it's almost 20 years ago now, I think, which makes me feel incredibly old. So I would say 18 years ago, because I'm 34 now, and I was about 16, I think. Maybe earlier. So yeah, maybe almost 20 years ago. Now, for those first 10 years, I messed around and I never really took it seriously. So I definitely want to, be very clear about that. When I started, I guess in college, towards the end of college, is when I started taking it really seriously, and that's a little over 10 years ago now, or about 10 years ago, I would say, yeah. So 10 years, I've been doing it pretty much professionally, and then yeah. And before that, I'd messed around, but I'd always been interested in computer graphics, whether it be Photoshop or After Effects or that kind of thing. Man, the amount of applications I went through when I was a kid, just trying stuff, and my parents were really supportive as well, so that was really cool. Your Blender course was really helpful to jump on 3D motion graphics train. I almost wish I could pay more for the new course. Well, I appreciate that, but it's I'm glad that got you into it. I think this one is a really great continuation. So I hope you enjoyed this one. I appreciate your enthusiasm and support. Thank you. Cool. I will learn Blender fundamentals. I've done After Effects in the past, but I feel it's very limited. That's why I switched over to Blender. I don't know. After Effects is great, but if you want to do 3D stuff, you have to learn a 3D application. You can get pretty far in After Effects and do some really cool stuff, but yeah, there's a lot of things that are a lot easier to do in 3D than trying to do them in After Effects. So ADT says, man, the more I look at this course, it's just perfect for motion graphics, intermediate level, focused on Eevee. Excited to pick it up and get started. Yeah, I think most of the people that have been following me for a while, that's kind of where I'm aiming at. I'm not really trying to break ground with a new crowd because I don't really see the point. This is kind of what I'm known for. So I wanted to stick with what I'm good at and really put something out that, you know, inspires people. So. Would you consider doing a small stream for one day for artists willing to start as a freelancer? I'm kind of tired of the studio rhythm. Well, I wouldn't say no to it. The only problem with that, I think, is that everybody's move to freelance is an incredibly personal story. So all of the stuff that applies for me doesn't necessarily apply to someone else. I don't mind sharing some experiences, but I sometimes doubt the validity of what I'm saying for people in different places. You know, to me, my story is because of where I live, because of how much money there is to be made in the industry here. You know, it depends on a lot of things. So I'm almost hesitant to try and give people advice on things because I don't know what their social situation is or money situation is. But I'm definitely down to try it. I don't mind, you know, if you have an idea and you know, I could put it out maybe on Twitter or somewhere else, maybe ask if people would be interested. And I'm happy to answer a couple of questions. But yeah, like I said, it's very varied. If I could give you one tip, it's like, if you are thinking about it, make sure you've got enough money to set aside, you know, to get through a couple of months at least, and probably even more, because it takes quite some time to build up a client base and to find clients that kind of fit your style of working and fit your style of communication. So I think that's incredibly important, something that you definitely want to look into. But both studio and freelance have advantages and disadvantages for sure. Sometimes when you're a freelancer, you're like, dang it, why don't I work in a studio? Because then my hours are defined and I know I've got money coming in on the regular. But the flip side of that is if I have to go to the shop at 2 in the afternoon, I can just go to the shop at 2 in the afternoon. So it's like both have advantages and disadvantages. Yeah, I found that freelance suited me a little bit more, I guess, because of the way I do stuff. It gives me a bit more personal freedom, and I have just enough, barely just enough discipline to make it all work. So, yeah. So somebody asked, when is this released? Today. It's on the Blender market right now. You can go get it. So. And Christopher says, Inkscape just released the long-awaited 1.0 version. Yes, indeed. And it was it's a good release. Great little application. So amazing stuff. Another one of those great open source projects. So if you make it to this question, your thoughts on the new Fluid in Blender? Personally, I'm not a fan. It's good. The problem is that people instantly start comparing it to other tools on the market, and then they're like, oh, it's not as good or whatever. Look, for the most part, it's Sebastian who's on his own trying to implement, you know, an external library to make this work in Blender. And I think sometimes we need to kind of stop and take note of that like one guy took the time to start developing this and it ended up in Blender because he did a really good job. There are definitely some bugs to be ironed out and some performance issues, but I think overall, for what you're getting in a free package, there's definitely nothing to really complain about. And if you really want to take it further, you know, you've got things like flip fluids or external applications like RealFlow and Houdini, and you can always bring that in Alembic format if you're super serious about that kind of stuff. So again, it's like, try not to pick it apart too much because there's been a lot of hard work gone into it. And I remember seeing the first demo of it maybe 2 or 3 years ago at the Blender conference and learning how to build Blender so I could try it out on my own. And it's come a really long way already. So I respect the work that's gone into it. I understand that people are a little bit frustrated with it, but I think if you look back at what the previous Fluid Sim could do and you look at what this one can do, it's a massive improvement. So yeah, I like it. I think I've done a couple of projects with it. It's not perfect, but is, you know, again, considering that it's free, it's pretty damn good value for what you're getting. All right. Just bought the course. We'll see how much I can get through this weekend. Cool, awesome. Thank you. I hope you enjoy it. To anybody that's bought it, I really do hope you enjoy it and have a good time with it. So Bert says, thank you, Mitch, for the tutorials. Wenn du not downloaded, Thanks, Bert. I appreciate that. So I'm from Belgium, and that was in Dutch. So yeah, he says thanks for the tutorials, and he's downloading them. And our conference will come. Hopefully, we can do stuff in the future. It was unlucky. Like, it's weird trying to organize a conference for the first time, and then, you know, a global pandemic happens. It's a way to throw a wrench in the plans, but yeah. All right, so last 3 questions and then we're done. So Jim says, just bought the course, it looks amazing. I've been following your work for a while, staring at Richard's series, such an eye-opening series that got me interested in motion graphics. Well, thanks, Jim. I've seen a lot of your stuff pass by on Twitter as well, and you do cool stuff. So I'm glad I could inspire you to get into this. There's a lot to be gained from messing around with experimental stuff and just trying things. So Gabriel says, sorry to repeat my question. I was referring to emissive volumetric meshes on Eevee. It always looks like a cube. Yes, that is actually something I talk about in the course as well. Right now, volumetrics in Eevee are limited to the bounding box of a mesh. So you can't actually get the mesh, the volume in the shape of the mesh yet. I'm sure that's something they want to fix in the future. Obviously, I have no information on when that might or might not be. But yeah, that's a limitation within Eevee. It's unfortunate, but yeah, that's just the way it is, I guess. So cool. And then the last comment is, congratulations for the release. I'll get it soon. Really like your workflow. I want to learn more about it. Cool. Well, thank you. Like I said, I hope everybody that buys the course enjoys it. And as I mentioned in the information here as well, if there's anything that you like or even don't like, please don't hesitate to contact me. I'm really happy to hear feedback on stuff that I can improve. I'm always looking to get something a little bit better out and improve the quality of the tutorials. But yeah, definitely got back into it a little bit because I had been really busy with other stuff. So hopefully this will ignite some YouTube stuff as well again, and I can pick it back up. So yeah, cool. I'd say that's about it. We're at almost an hour. Jesus, I'm just rambling on. But yeah, thank you all for joining, and to everybody that's buying the course. I really, really appreciate it. I'm coming up to a very special time in my life where I can definitely use the downtime, and yeah, this is going to be a huge help for me and my wife, and you know, our family growing. Let's put it that way. So cool. And with that, I'm going to end it. And yeah, thanks everybody. I hope you all have a really nice weekend, and I hope everybody can stay safe and stay healthy. And if you want to ask me anything, you know where to find me. And yeah, have a really good night, everybody, and talk to you later. Bye-bye.